A company as big as WWE needs its own developmental system, and during the new millennium, 3 promotions were designated as such. Ohio Valley Wrestling came first, Deep South Wrestling was next, and then came Florida Championship Wrestling, staying in place until the modern NXT was founded. The superstars to come out of these places is a veritable who's who of professional wrestling, with multi-time world champions John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, and more all coming through the system. However, no matter how well you do in developmental, that success won't always translate to the main roster. Shall we look at some examples of this? I'm Ben from What Culture, and here are 10 WWE developmental champions who came to nothing. Number 10, the Basham Brothers. A bit of a 2-for-1 to start with, and one that might not actually be too kind, as the Basham Brothers were 2-time WWE Tag Team Champions. From that, it'd be easy to conclude the pair did alright for themselves. But, well, yes, they did, but then this is without taking into account that Doug and Danny Basham were 2 of the biggest stars in Ohio Valley Wrestling for a time. Doug Basham was initially one of the top faces of the company, but turned heel in 2001 and became the #1 bad guy. He had 4 OVW Heavyweight Championship reigns, with his 3rd reign ended by none other than Batista. Danny Basham also experienced a lot of success in OVW, also winning the top title on 4 occasions. The duo were a big deal in OVW, but ironically, it would be their eventual teaming on the main roster that would bring them down. Number 9, Richie Steamboat. Son of the legendary Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Richie Steamboat was actually the final FCW Florida Heavyweight Champion before NXT took over the WWE developmental game. Richie won the title by defeating Rick Victor, aka Victor of the Ascension, but just 25 days later, it was deactivated. Richie's own career was then deactivated way ahead of its time, as he eventually retired young due to injuries. Steamboat made the transition to NXT fairly well and was involved in a decent feud with Cassius Ohno when his back gave in. We don't know what would have happened with Richie Steamboat if injury hadn't forced him to retire young, and sadly, we never will. Number 8, Mike Cruel. Familiar with Mike Cruel? How about Kid Cruel? Mike Mayo? Michael Washington Cruel? Well, it was under that final name that Cruel became the penultimate OVW Heavyweight Champion, defeating Vladimir Kozlov for the title before losing it to Evan Bourne. Cruel made the move to FCW with the developmental system, but the bad guy All-American was eventually released from his contract in 2009. Before signing with the company, Cruel worked a number of dark matches for WWE, losing to JBL as well as coming up short in tag team competition against Hardcore Holly and Charlie Haas. Number 7, Chris Cage. Chris Cage was a 1-time OVW Heavyweight Champion, defeating Matt Morgan for his one and only reign way back in 2004. However, Cage experienced much more success in the tag ranks, winning OVW Tag Gold 4 times and the FCW equivalent twice, once with Trent Beretta. And it's his time with Beretta that those with good memories will remember, as the duo teamed very briefly on ECW and SmackDown. They were known as the Dude Busters in FCW, but for some reason the name was dropped by the time they made the main roster. Oh, and Cage was also known as Kalen Croft by this point. The team didn't experience much success at all, however, and Croft, or Cage, was released in November 2010. Number 6, Chet The Jet. Other than looking like a strange mix of Jack Swagger and The Miz, chances are you couldn't say too much about the professional wrestling career of Chet Douglas. He was known as Chet The Jet in OVW and superfan Chet Douglas in FCW, and that first name is ridiculous. Shout out to all my Chets. Chet The Jet was a 2-time OVW Heavyweight Champion, with both of his runs coming in 2006. Still, he does have one very impressive victory on his resume, as his first championship win came by defeating one Mr. CM Punk, who held the strap for almost 3 months. Chet was never called up to the main roster and was released in 2008 after violating the WWE Wellness Program. Number 5, Erik Escobar. If you blinked particularly hard in late 2009, you would have missed Erik Escobar's run on SmackDown. Escobar was introduced alongside Vicky Guerrero, but was quite obviously not ready for TV. After being abandoned by Vicky, he turned face, losing a load of handicap matches that the SmackDown GM put him in. 3 months after making his debut on SmackDown, however, Erik Escobar was released. The end of the previous year was completely different for the Puerto Rican Nightmare, however, as on the 11th of December, he defeated none other than Sheamus O'Shaughnessy to become only the 3rd ever FCW Florida Heavyweight Champion. Number 4, Johnny Jeter. Johnny Jeter would go on to be the 5th member of Spirit Squad, winning Tag Team Gold in the process before the male cheerleaders were unceremoniously dumped in a crate and sent back to OVW. Jeter was a 2-time OVW Heavyweight Champion, winning it in 2003 and 2005. He would eventually drop the title to former tag team partner Matt Cappotelli in emotional circumstances, but it was his tag team with Cappotelli that possibly produced Jeter's greatest time in WWE Developmental. The duo were known as the Thrill Seekers and were frequently rumored to be making the jump up to the main roster. That never happened though, and just 2 months after beating Jeter for the title, Cappotelli announced his retirement. Jeter went on to become a male cheerleader before being released in 2007. Number 3. Jay Bradley. Jay Bradley, or Ryan Braddock as he was known on SmackDown, won a whole load of titles at a developmental level. He was a 3-time Deep South Wrestling champion as well as a 2-time OVW heavyweight champion, although the second of those came just after OVW and WWE parted ways. Still, his time on SmackDown was largely forgettable. As far as we can remember, Braddock won only one match, beating Festus, now Luke Gallows, by disqualification after Festus and tag team partner Jesse wrapped him up in bubble wrap. Not really a victory then, unfortunately. Bradley is a great example of the type of pro wrestler who would be dominant at lower levels, but just didn't seem to have that intangible X factor to make the step up. Admittedly, he wasn't given a chance to, as he was given a crap name and a look that all but guaranteed a lack of fan interest. Number 2. Brent Albright. It all started quite well for Brent Albright on SmackDown. Rechristened Gunner Scott, he actually managed to defeat Booker T in his opening match, albeit thanks to a boogeyman distraction. This was followed by a backstage segment with Chris Benoit, where Benoit endorsed his effort and ability and took him under his wing somewhat, but this didn't last, and before long he was getting squashed by the Great Khali, sent back to OVW, and then released. Brent Albright was actually the first OVW Triple Crown champion, winning the OVW Heavyweight Championship 2 times, the television title once, and the tag belts on one occasion with Chris Masters. He was also involved in one of the hottest OVW feuds of all time against CM Punk, a feud that had the fingerprints of Paul Heyman all over it. Number 1. Mason Ryan. Everything went well for Mason in developmental, as just 6 months after making his debut, he defeated the then Johnny Curtis, now Fandango, and Alex Riley in a triple threat match to become the FCW Florida Heavyweight Champion. He defended the title against a whole host of opponents over a 6-month stretch before losing it to Bo Dallas in February 2011. It was during this championship run that Mason Ryan made his debut on the main roster, aiding CM Punk in a match against John Cena to join the new Nexus. Despite being thrown in towards the top of the card and getting a big Royal Rumble elimination spot in the process, it never really came together for Mason Ryan on the main roster. He potted around for a few years, suffered a couple of injuries before being released in 2014.
Sacrifice.
Gosh, can you believe that person said that about that particular video on that entry? I sure can't. But you should like, share and subscribe below anyway. And also, the people who made this video, they're right here. Go follow them and give them some love. Also, there's more content, probably above my head. Check it out. Or don't. 50-50.